Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We'll give it a couple of seconds before we get started and introducing our amazing panelists here. Okay, so I'll just get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Shay. I'm the regional director for the Northeast section of this amazing organization, 1,000 Women Strong. Here we have our two amazing panelists who will introduce themselves with their amazing bios. But if you are new to 1,000 Women Strong, we are a national constituency that's focused on making sure that we are centering Black women in the conversation for the student loan crisis. We have been doing this with a partnership with the ACLU and making sure that we tackle this issue that's affecting Black women on proportionate rates. And today we're going to be talking about an activist perspective on the student loan crisis. And so I'll leave it to the both of you to introduce yourselves so that we know who's in the room.
I'll go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Erica Lassiter. I'm currently a senior now. Pandemic got everyone confused. I'm currently a senior now at Rutgers University, Newark, studying public administration. Outside of my studies at Rutgers University, Newark, of course, I'm an advocate/activist for Black and Brown people who experience trauma of all sorts, specifically sexual trauma. We do that through my small brand called Oshun the Brand. We also have a podcast where we host and we talk about engaging topics that surround the Black and Brown community as well. So thank you so much for having me here.
Great to have you.
Well, I guess it's my turn. Hi, guys. My name is Caroline Jean. Everybody calls me Kari. So if you want to call me Kari during this meeting, that's definitely fine. I just graduated from St. John's University. It's really crazy given the pandemic. I kind of rushed through college, but I'm very grateful for going to St. John's because it made me the activist that I am today because of everything that went on during campus. Currently, I am the Community Outreach Deputy for Black Minds. It's an up-and-coming community outreach organization based in my neighborhood, Mill Basin, and I'm really excited to see where that goes. Thank you.
So the both of you are pretty much really ingrained in activism work all throughout, not just New York City, New Jersey, but really pretty much anywhere that has to do with getting things done, right? And so if you tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do and kind of what your role in the movement has been so far and kind of where you see it going.
I'll definitely answer that first. I think, especially since I went to predominantly white institutions from high school and college, and seeing everything that went on with like Black Lives Matter, it really pushed me to create a space wherever I was a student to make sure that everybody was heard. And especially going to St. John's, anytime there was a protest on campus and I could make it, I was there. So following like that energy that I picked up there with Black Minds, I really want to reach out to like my neighborhood because I lived here for 20 years of my life. And there's so many issues that we are not aware of, and seeing other like community organizations, I really want to bring that to where I live.
That's so dope. I'm sorry. I was like, oh, that's lit. But I kind of have an opposite experience. I grew up, I'm born and raised from Newark. So I kind of got to experience the side of just people like urban women just going through the day-to-day struggle, and me myself going through it as well, that kind of drives me along my way to just want to go out and help and just be a voice for people who don't often get to share their voice. So I think that's where I kind of fit in there. And we do that, like I said, through sexual trauma, especially because it's really rampant, especially in urban communities. And it's often like brushed under the rug. So that's kind of where I'm at in life.
No, and both of you are doing amazing work when it comes to that and really centering women, Black women in the conversation as well, which I know we can all agree has been often not been centered. And so I would love to hear what you guys think about, the role of Black women, not only in activism, but also just it being received or acknowledged in these spaces that we operate in. And either one of you can hop in and jump around.
I'll go. I think it's super important that women of color especially are at the forefront of these movements. Oftentimes there's lots and lots of resistance. I know for me personally, I started my platform by speaking out on just sexual trauma in my own life, and it was really pushback. It was like, really? That's what you want to talk about on this space, this open space where everyone can just tap in and everyone can like express an opinion? And I was like, yeah, like I want to be at the forefront of the conversation. I want to write my own narrative. And usually for Black women, especially Black women who've experienced sexual trauma, we don't get to write that narrative. So I think it's really important and it's really major that we're at the forefront.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing that experience and making sure that just so everybody knows that this is a safe space. We can openly talk about certain things that are unconventional or not usually talked about. And so thank you so much for sharing that.
For me, it was, I guess, similar in the sense of I always wanted to create a platform where I can talk about different things, because through my like education with being a legal studies major and a sociology minor, like, activism is something that I care about. But I was always afraid because I was a Black woman, and the things that I would say coming out of my mouth, like people would take it the wrong way, because it's just like, oh, you're a bitter Black woman, like, oh, you're gonna die alone, like nobody's gonna want to like be with you because you speak this way. And I really feel like the things that I have been doing recently, and especially being like the only girl in my group, like right now, it's kind of pushing me to have a voice and really like reminding people you need to center people other than like cishet Black men. So I feel like, me being the small person that I am now, like I could make a pathway for a bunch of other women.
And that's amazing. And I know that we're here to talk about student loan crisis, right? And how much it really does affect Black women and kind of in our own respective roles within activism. And even though you both are taking it in different approaches, I wonder, have you guys heard about the conversation of student loan crisis? Has it been an ongoing issue where people are actually taking moves to do that? And what do you guys have thoughts on that? And how does it intersect with maybe kind of the work that you do now, right? Is there any intersections within the activism that you guys do?
I would definitely say there's an intersection because we don't specifically just focus on sexual trauma. We focus on all different forms of trauma. So financial problems are always at the forefront of trauma. When people think of generational curses and generational wealth, that's a form of trauma. So I think that it's definitely an intersection between the work that I do and this cause. And I think that personally, coming from an inner city, you hear the stereotype like, oh, you're not going to go to college because you can't afford it. So I was always told that, and I was always trying to push that narrative like, okay, I'm going to still go to college. I'm going to still make a way. I'm going to still make a way. And I had to develop a new relationship with loans and how I understood loans, because in my family, a loan was like the end of it all. It was like the end of the world. So developing a new relationship with loans and understanding them and how to pay them back and how to use them to my advantage, I think that would definitely put a scope to like my conversation with loans, and also just like the intersectionality between my work and loans and like, financial crisis.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I don't think it's necessarily in the work that we do, but the people that I work with, like we're all students. So eventually, like when we graduate, especially with me being a graduate, like my 4-year plan did not go the way I thought it was. I thought I was going to go straight to law school. So in my head, I was like, oh, loans, I know I'm going to be in debt because I'm going to law school. So if I need to take it, then I need to take it. And now like I'm getting letters in the mail like, Kari, you gotta pay your bills. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, because right now I'm in the place where it's like, yes, I really want to like do the activism, and people are always telling you like activism doesn't pay the bills, and like making money and being financially like free, as they say, so I could be able to live a good life. So I think for me that's more of like a personal battle and a battle for like the people that I work with, because we really do have to worry about like how can we do the work that we want to do and also make sure that we're good.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I think that's such a huge conversation, especially because a lot of us are very young in activism. And so it's like, wait, I want to dedicate my time to this and like organize and do all these great, amazing things. But like, where is the time in the day? And it's like you find yourselves at like 2, 3 in the morning up trying to do things. It's just like this is not sustainable long term. So how do you think that student loans in general like has impacted your activism, or will impact your activism moving forward? Oh, I think we lost Erica. But you can go ahead, Kari, while we get her back.
I definitely feel like now that I have these loans looming over me, I constantly have to battle between picking like doing activism, because I realize like this is what makes me happy, and finding a way that I could do what I want to do and get compensated for it. Like I know for me, like money isn't everything, but like it's a reality. Like I'm eventually going to have to pay those loans off, like because I can't really sacrifice myself totally for a cause. Like it's a harsh reality, but it is a reality.
And I think and I don't know if you agree with me, but I think a lot of people in this space of organizing and activism find themselves in that struggle of like, how can I do this work if I'm not getting paid for it and still do the work while having another job or having kids or having, a family to take care of and bills and paying rent and all these other factors that are like intersectional in that sense, but still wanting to do the work. Do you, I don't know if you feel comfortable with this, do you currently have loans? Oh, you're muted.
I have the Parent Plus loan, and then the loan that like you get through FAFSA. And like it was just tough because that was the only way that I could get financial aid, because I'm kind of in that section of it's like, yeah, I don't have the money to pay for college, but because my parents have the job that they have and like we have that privilege, that I'm not eligible for like, FAFSA financial aid type things.
Right. And I know that we lost Erica, hopefully we can get her back into this great conversation, but what intersectionalities do you find yourself in terms of just like home life, in terms of having to balance your work, everything else in between, and still having to literally have student Sally Mae knocking on your door in like 6 months as a recent grad?
I feel like now, because for me, since my plan of like going straight through did not like work out how I wanted it to, it's kind of like I'm in this like, what do I do now? Period. And I feel like this whole summer I've really been putting together like, Kari, like you cannot pretend that you're gonna enjoy working at like a personal injury firm as a paralegal. Like you're gonna be miserable. Yes, it's going to pay your bills, but you're gonna be miserable. But it's kind of like I'm gonna have to do it so I can pay these loans. And if I could pay this off and not have to worry about that, I could be fully dedicated to the work that I want to do. And like, yes, it's not a hobby, and yes, it's like a passion and substantial work, but it's just like I need to kind of realize like right now I may not be getting compensated for it, but do something else so at the end of the day I can still help the people that I want to help.
Right. And I love that. I think that that's such a huge conversation that like we don't really hear a lot in organizing and in activist spaces, where it's like, this is not paying the bills. For like 9 out of 10 times it doesn't pay the bills. And so it's like, how do you find that balance? I know it's a hard balance for me sometimes. I'm like, wait, I want to do this work, but like it's taking up so much of my time. How do I then go back to doing my actual work and then making sure that I'm still good? And then when we were in school, just having to balance that and then balance grades and all of that, fun stuff. um, what do you think would be an ideal situation, right? Like if we were able to remove student loans and everything else, like would you still want to do your work in activism, or would you want to go to law school and kind of go down that road of activism? Or like what would that look like for you?
Like in my head, like my plan is, okay, we're gonna get this little job during, your gap year. You're gonna go to law school and you're gonna, like, what I really want to do in life is use the education that I have to bring about the change that I want to see, and it not just like be theory anymore or ideas. Like I really want to be able to do that. And then I kind of like have to remind myself that like, yo, Kari, like if this is what you want to do, like loans might be a part of it. So like that falls with that intersection. And it's kind of like, yeah, you have to make your little sacrifice that you can't live out your total dream right now, but you grinding in that area is going to let you like live the fulfilled life that you want to live.
Right. And I definitely agree with all of that. If anyone in the audience would love to ask a question, please feel free to do so. There is a question tab. Joining in the conversation in the chat box as well. Definitely feel free to join in on this. This is definitely a bigger conversation of like how do we move forward, right? Like how do we find a balance between doing the work of activism and dealing with those issues and barriers that may exist, and still having student loans on top of that and having to pay that bill back every month, right? And so definitely join in the conversation. We'd love to hear your perspectives or any points that you would like to make in this conversation. All right, Kari, it's gonna be a serious question. If you had the chance or the opportunity, would you take out loans again?
If I didn't have to, I wouldn't have. Like, I would have just like, I feel like sometimes I look back and was like, yo, when you were in high school, if you opened that SAT book and you got like a little bit more points, then you could have got a full scholarship. If you like stayed home and didn't dorm, like you wouldn't have to worry about these things. So if I could do it all over again, I would just like have made more of a push or more of a sacrifice to like not have to do that at all. But like sometimes when I think about it, I'm like, I needed to like dorm for my own like mental health, like to make sure that the grades that I got through college was because I made that choice. But if I could make that choice without having to ask the government for anything, like I would do it in a heartbeat.
No, yeah, and I think that also touches upon like some of the inequalities that exist, not even might, when it comes to taking out student loans. Like you have to do certain things. Like it's pretty much on survival of like, I have to get this done. I have to do this. I have no other option. And sometimes people forget that in the conversation, like we have no choice but to do it. But I think definitely if we were like in an ideal situation, it'd be like, what are student loans? Like, what? I'm not taking that out for what? So we do have a question by one of our amazing attendees. They said, do you feel like you can balance the duality of work and activism? What things can make you not balance the duality?
I feel like
it's a two-part question.
I feel like for me, I think that I want my work to be the activism so bad that in this moment, it's very, 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 very hard for me to separate it, simply because I don't want to. Because I know that like I'm going to be miserable doing like a basic paralegal law clerk type job. So I so desperately want it to be one thing. So I kind of have to like, I'm in the zone of like being like, this is reality. Like you need to be able to survive and be independent and make time for the things that you really care about. So I think I really have to teach myself that there is a duality.
And the second part of that question was, what things can Ooh, what things could make you not balance the duality?
I think once you get really passionate about something, you don't want to let it go. Like, I'm a stubborn person, and if I want something to happen, I will cause hell and make sure it happens, even if it kills me. And I feel like sometimes, especially with activism, you can't let that activism kill you, because you will like be so stressed, you'll be so tired, you will forget that like you are your own separate person. So you really gotta like push yourself to set a boundary and like stick to that boundary.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's a saying that like in order for you to be able to help the community, you have to be able to help yourself. And I think that that's such a huge like weird dynamic there, because it's like you want to help the community so bad, but it's like sometimes you get lost, and it's like, wait, how do I kind of bring myself back without like losing yourself to the movement or like leaving it behind in a sense, but still finding that space of like, I need to take care of myself right now so that I can be the best version of myself. So I definitely agree with that. And Erica, the question was, do you feel like you could balance a duality with work and activism? And the second part was, we just answered, which is what things can make you not balance a duality.
I think you can. I think with everything, it just comes with multitasking, which I'm not really good at. So I'm going to say personally for me, no. But I think that if you really try hard enough, you can balance activism and what you do outside of your own work. And then at the same time, I'm the type of person where I want to infuse the two together. I would love for my activism to be my work. So I think that that also goes to show, like, that goes to talk about more so like, who are you outside of work? Because I know that sometimes I confuse the two together. And what was the second part of the question? I want to make sure that I answered that one correctly.
Yeah, the second part was what things to make you not balance the duality. So more so like what kinds of barriers can you find between like trying to find that balance, and like how, and I would even add like, how do you go about that?
I think it just goes to what you guys said at the end. I kind of, like jumped in a little bit. I think it's about the self-care. Not prioritizing self-care can definitely be a big hindrance for me. But some ways that I've actually actively like trying to like, address that. And they're all about peaks and stuff. And they talk about like, having a 30-minute nap every day will definitely change your life. So I think that that's something that I agree with, and that's something that I'm trying to do. So just taking rest and just taking that time for self-care, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. There is another question. What are your opinions on the concept of Black women in career fields not being paid as much as their counterparts? That's the first part of the question.
Well, of course, I don't like it, because like I pay just as much as you to get the education. I'm just as educated as you, but because of who I am in this society, like you want to pay me less. Like, it's kind of, I feel like sometimes it makes me not want to be in certain spaces that I know I'm supposed to be in, because I know I'm not going to get compensated like everybody else. And that I have to work so much harder to get like a fraction of what they get. So it's really frustrating, especially when you want to go down a certain path in life.
It's crazy that this question just comes up because I actually just left a position because I found out how much I was getting paid. And honestly, I was really upset, like with myself. I don't know. It was like I was in the middle because I really liked the job. Like the job gave me so much experience with like the career that I'm trying to pursue and everything. And I was like, this is the perfect job. And then it was like when I saw the pay and I'm like, so I didn't really know how to react to it. I was kind of just like, wow. And so I really went to the higher ups. I asked them, I was like, I noticed this thing. And it was kind of just like, in reality, they kind of like, they weren't even trying to budge with the situation. They were just kind of like, it is what it is. And it's kind of just like, I was so outraged, and I was just like, I don't even know what to say. So it was kind of like, oh, you either take it or leave it. And I feel like at the end of the day, that kind of just shows like, it was kind of like they were telling me my own worth. Like, you know, like you either take what we're giving you, or you're not worth what this other person is worth. So at the end of the day, it kind of just made me feel less than. And I literally just left because I was like, I can't be in a position where I'm feeling less than, and I am considered to other people like I am less than. So it's really like a hard road. It's a hard road to be on. So I'm still triggered. Yeah.
No, definitely. That's extremely valid because I've personally been in those situations too, where I have, 3-4+ years of experience and like my salary does not match that. But I know that my other male counterpart in the same job field has an entire like set salary, more days off, like is just a lot more flexible with them and what their needs are. And so listen, it's a trigger. It is a trigger. And it's a lot to deal with. And I wonder, do you guys think that there's any effects of paying back your student loans because of it? Or, what kind of effects that can have on having to take out more loans because we're not getting paid, or having to get on unemployment and things like that because we can't find a job that really values the work that we do.
It's kind of like if you're not getting paid a certain amount of money and you need to budget for other things in your life, like where is the money left over so you could pay these loans, so there is no adverse effects later. So it's kind of like people don't realize that, we all have the same bill, so why aren't we getting paid the same money? Like, and then we get the flack of like, oh, you don't have generational wealth, you don't have this, you don't have that. And it's like, I can't have that because I'm not getting paid what I'm supposed to be getting paid.
Yeah, and also like I just really thought back to something that I was reading earlier. It was like an article, and it was talking about how people who are getting minimum wage can't afford where they're living at. Like in a couple of years, or it was like either a couple of years or a couple of months, they're not going to be able to afford where they're living at now. And I just kind of thought of like, wow. So to think that even if I'm getting minimum wage, sometimes I can still be getting paid less than my white counterpart, which is still absurd because it's like we all have, like you said, we all have the same bills. So that just really got me thinking about the article. Like it's really crazy. It's really crazy.
Mm-hmm. No, and we definitely know that in general, Black women are paid less than even other women, other men, and pretty much any other demographic out there. And so having to deal with those issues of just like being treated as equally as everyone else, getting the pay that we're worth, and we work 10 times harder at anything that we dedicate ourselves to, and finding all of those balances while still having to pay rent and still paying all the bills and everything else in between. It's like, at what point can we be heard? And like we've been talking about this for the longest, right? Like this isn't anything new. The stats are there to back us up. Like we're not getting paid enough. We're not getting equal pay. And so it's just like, what more can we do in the activism space that will lead us to like changing the conversation of like, this actually has to be changed? And how do we even go about that, right? And so I think that that's definitely a bigger conversation. I don't know if you guys had anything to add to that in that regard. I know that, Erica, while you were away, we are talking a little bit about some of the inequalities that come with having to take out student loans, right? Like how, some of us have to do it because of the situation that we're in, whether it's that we need housing or whether we don't live in a stable home. And so dorming is the best option for us, or having that meal plan is the only that we're going to be able to eat, right? And things like that. And so I asked Kari this question. I'm going to ask you this question as well. If you had to do it all over again, I know that you're still in school, would you take out student loans again? Like, or would you take it out in general?
When I think of this, honestly, I'm going to say, in a sense, like I'm going to acknowledge my privilege, sort of kind in this situation, because I know that the amount of loans that I have are not compared to like as my other counterparts. Like I've talked to people who have like $80,000 in loans, $100K in loans, and I'm just like, well, here's my $20K. Like, I'm just like, oh, like, and they're just like, I wish I was you. So in reality, would I do it again? I think, yeah, because the way that I go about repaying my loans, I already started repaying them back. I started repaying them back freshman year as soon as I took it out. So I think that the way that I'm going about it is a little bit more unconventional than what they tell you to do. They're like, oh, you have a grace period, you have all this time to pay it back, when in reality it's like you really don't. Because if you think about it, when you leave college, automatically they tell you're going to get that white picket fence, you want to get that house, you need to get that car. So it's like, how am I going to be able to pay back my loans while still trying to achieve that American dream? So I think the way that I'm going about it is a little bit more unconventional, but it's also like, I think, a better route. So I think I would do it all over again, because college has allowed me to experience so many things that I don't think that without it I would have experienced. So I think I would do it again.
Okay, yeah, and I would definitely say that in the and I don't know if you guys have heard this, but there could be a lot of blaming or shaming for having maybe a lesser amount of loans that compared to other people. But at the end of the day, it's like $20,000 of loans, like that's someone's salary. That's half of your salary, like that you're paying back. And so in that case, it's like 20,000. It might not be 100,000 for someone else, but that's still a large amount of money that I shouldn't even have to pay back in the first place. So it's I wanted to add to like that aspect of it.
I don't think that I've ever been like necessarily shamed for like the amount of loans that I've had, because I don't really think like the people around me, we really like talk about it. And if we do talk about it, we're kind of like in a similar range, and we're kind of like, yeah, like how are we ever gonna pay that off? Like I never like personally experienced that shame. And I feel like mostly when I see shame, it's in regard to us being like, why do we have to pay this back? Because it's like our whole lives, they tell us like, okay, if you don't go to college, like you're gonna be nothing and you're gonna be that minimum wage worker. Like quarantine was the only time that I saw like the general society praise like these people who are making like $15 an hour if they live in the city, right? So it's kind of like I feel like most of the backlash is with us like realizing we don't want to pay this and we shouldn't have to pay it. And it's kind of like, yo, you told me that I have to do this to be somebody, and you make college so inaccessible that I have to do this. And now that I don't want to give you your money back because I'm kind of like your investment, you call me like lazy and like ungrateful. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's a level of whether it's demographic or identities or anything that kind of partake in that conversation of like how we are lazy, whether it's like because we're Gen Z or because we're a minority, or like what kind of factors do you think play into that that label?
I feel like it's really a generational thing, and I think it's more of a response from them kind of being like, I had to suffer, so you have to suffer too, because it's just a part of life. And I feel like so many people, especially older people, are just so used to going through the motions, because when they tried to like shake things up, it was very performative what they got in the end. And I kind of feel like they think that there isn't going to be any substantial change for us either, so they're kind of like, fall in line while you have the chance, because nothing is going to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that that's definitely a conversation that needs to change, of just this is the only route, and if you don't do this, you're like nothing. And I think that like as Gen Z, we're kind of moving more towards that, and I think that a lot of other generations are also realizing it. Whereas like we can have entrepreneurs, we can have trade jobs, we can have all these different kind of avenues of exploring like how we move forward and just work together in a society like that's beneficial for everyone in it. And so I think that's definitely a better approach than like you have to go to school, you have to take out these loans, you have to do all these things. And an attendee just asked literally one of the best questions, which is like, what advice would you give to a high school senior or a NEET college student that's taking out student loans for the first time?
I would say like really do your research, because I feel like I was in a place where I needed the money so bad that like I just did not care. I was just like, I need this right now. I already know that like with what I want to do, I'm gonna be like so much in debt that I don't even care. Like that was really like my mindset all throughout college. And like it sounds like I have a lot of debt, but I really don't. But it's still like in those moments, it was like I don't care. In the end, it's probably going to be like 100K because I'm probably going to go to this fancy private law school. So it doesn't matter, but it does matter. So if you are going to do this, really do the research. Find someone that you can talk to, because I know with everybody, like they can't talk to their family because this is a new experience for them. Like find whoever you can, do your research, and make sure that it really is the best decision for you.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think looking at interest rates is also very much important, because that can definitely determine like how much of interest it's going to go up for like from the actual amount that you take out. That increased price, listen, it's important. I would also say look into as much aid as you can get from the state side than to go into like private loans, just because I personally found that it's a little bit better in terms of just like repayment options and like refinancing later on, like once you're out of school, and finding a way to kind of like pay based on how much you make and things like that, instead of like this set price that they give you, that you have to pay every month. So just finding out those different options. Apply to as many grants and scholarships as possible. Like talk to your school or the school that you want to go to if you're a high school senior, and kind of see if they can like up your scholarship amount or something like that that you can kind of like try to finesse. But yeah, definitely try to exert all other options before like picking that final loan that you decide to take out. Would be the best thing. And like Ari said, literally it's find someone that you can talk to, that can kind of, who's been there, done that, and can kind of help you along the process of like, maybe don't use this loan, or don't go to this private loan person or bank instead. That might be best for you. I hope that was a little bit of advice. And so we also have another question. What can Black women in activism do to make sure that their role is not undermined as it was in previous movements? I love this question. I think this is actually something that we were talking about previously, of just like our role in everything. But I would love for everyone to hear you speak on it.
Like I said earlier, like I'm the only girl in my group, like as of now. And like I feel like going in, I was so afraid of being like, I don't know, like a B word, because I don't know if I could curse, but yeah, like I was so afraid of being perceived as that, or being perceived as like emotional. So I feel like go in knowing your voice and being firm in your voice. Like now I'm way more comfortable being like, I don't like this, like we should do this, like we should try that. Like don't be afraid because you're the only one to stick up for yourself, because you being the only one right now can turn into a bunch of you later on.
Right. And I think you said it perfectly. I think you said it perfectly. Um, I've been in similar situations like that. And I think that for most Black women, I feel like we are used to being the only Black woman in certain rooms that we walk into. And so really being able to not be afraid of your voice and not be afraid of speaking up and making demands and making sure that your voice is being centered in that conversation. Because as you said, um, literally like our voice hasn't been centered in previous movements. And so we have to see where the gaps were before and kind of how we can change it moving forward. And so that's something that we have to do. We have to be more vocal about it. We have to make sure that we are that voice for other women that aren't in the room. And that's the type of space that we constantly have to take up on until we could get more women in the room and help uplift more women to kind of be more vocal in whatever respective space that they're in. I really want Erica to answer this question too, so I'll wait for her to connect a little bit.
Y'all, this Zoom app keeps crashing and it's the life. It's really the end of me, bro. I swear technology is so crazy. Okay.
No, you're good. You're good. We have a really great, interesting question. And we would really love to hear your perspective on it. And it's, what can Black women in activism do to make sure that their role is not undermined as it was in previous movements?
Oh, wow.
Right?
I'd say I'd say knowing when to advocate strictly for Black women, because I know that even like when it was against the women's rights, it was like Black women, we always tend to take on the role of like, we want to help everybody. We want to be she hero. We want to save everyone. But I feel like we need to just worry about ourselves. And I feel like that's like with anything, and we just need to worry about ourselves. So I think that maybe just taking the time and the space to cater towards specifically Black women and strides for Black women instead of just trying to help everyone. I don't know if that's kind of like selfish, but I think that's just my perspective.
No, I definitely agree. I don't know if Kari, you have anything to add to that, but I definitely agree.
I feel like people may take it as selfishness, but when you're left out so much, sometimes you have to, like, if you want to get things done and you want to get it done right, you kind of have to do it yourself. And I feel like now, like, of course, like in the past, there have been so many organizations centered like around women, like since Jim Crow era. So this is nothing new with us centering ourselves, but I feel like now it's really in our face about like how many women run like organizations exist. Like I follow this one person from Texas and she has like head of Hoochies of Texas and it's all women. And like she took something that was so like demeaning that people would call her online and like now she's doing something very empowering for people who look like her. So I love that.
We love to see it. So we definitely have another question. Do you feel well supported by your institution's financial aid office? Were there any issues that you had along the way?
I'm going to answer this. No, not at all. I remember even today, like I still get anxiety walking into that office and like asking them any type of question because it's like you hear one thing from one counselor and then you go to another counselor and they're like, oh, that's false. I feel like it's just a lot of runaround. And I know that in the beginning, when I knew that I had to take out a loan, I was like, okay, like what are like my steps? So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the financial aid office and I'm going to ask them like, how does this work? And it was just it was like no type of help. It was like, I was like, you get paid to do this. And it was just like, I was bothering them. I feel like a lot of the times when you go to financial aid office, it's like, you're bothering them. It's like, you're trying to pay your tuition, but it's like, you're bothering us. So I feel like I didn't feel supported at all. And I feel like that was definitely an issue. I was trying to understand loans in a different way. I was trying to understand how could they benefit me. And the office wasn't trying to be supportive with that at all. So I think that was definitely a difficulty for me, and I ended up having to do my own research on it. And then yeah, now here we are. So
for me, I definitely have a story to tell about St. John's Financial Aid Office. So it's like it was before my freshman year, I knew I had to take out like a loan for that school year. So I did. And like I never got the money. So I was just like, okay, I guess like I never got approved for this money at all. And like I'm going through like the whole semester. I had to end up paying it out of pocket. And one day I was like, let me go to the financial aid office. Like it's the end of the semester. I want to know what happened like with that money. So I go and ask them, and the lady was like, oh yeah, like I see like you registered for a loan like in August. Let me go call the government. And then for the next semester, I got the money for both the fall semester and the spring semester. So it's kind of like you had my money sitting there. You knew that I needed it. And because I didn't know any better, like you just let me like struggle basically. And I like ever since then, I was just like, if I could avoid like getting another loan as best as I can, like I will literally do that because what is going to happen if I end up in that situation again? And like I know so many people who have tried to like talk to financial aid and there's they're always so rude. And it's the fact that it's not like a St. John's problem or a Rutgers problem. Like it happens to literally every single student in every single institution.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think that's such a huge conversation of like how much support do we really have about this issue and how much more can we say about it. Like I feel like this is not anything like new in a sense of like we've been saying that financial aid offices don't do nothing for nobody. Like it does not help us at all. We have to figure it out on our own. We have to ask around. We have to talk to our friends and be like, did you have the same problem? Are you okay? Did you get your money in? Like, are you good? Did and ask all these questions just to kind of see like, are we the only ones going through it? And 9 out of 10 times it's like, no, we're just another person in this group of students that don't have access to reliable information, that don't have access to the information that we like to have access to the people that we need to talk to or know who they are. Like, why are you hiding? Like, we need to know who you are. And so many of these other avenues. And so I definitely agree that we need to kind of change the system and how it looks like the financial aid office and how we kind of go about that. I wonder, has any of you have both of you ever heard of any issues on campus or things like that with the financial aid office outside of just like students talking about the issues that we face, or has there been any protests or conversations or petitions in any of you of either schools that you guys attended or go to?
I would say for me at Rutgers, no. Like it's like one of those things where it's like everyone complains about, but like we just don't say anything about it. We're just like, we won't dare say anything about the financial aid office because like if we do, like, will we be reprimanded? Like what's gonna happen? So I think it's one of those like scare tactics. I don't know what the financial aid office has going on there, the voodoo, the hoodoo, but yeah, like no one says anything. It's like something like we all complain about, but we're like, well, I'm gonna still go there though. Like one of those. So yeah.
Right.
I feel like going to St. John's, like one thing we're gonna do is protest. Like if anything happens, like I feel like one thing in general that I liked about St. John's, I always knew in the back of my mind, if like anything happened to me on that campus, like the students were gonna like ride for me. So like with like tuition being raised in multiple instances, like I've seen like a post talking about how like there was an act where schools were supposed to freeze tuition and like St. John's opted out of that. And like, unless we tell each other, like, we do not know these things. So like, it kind of boggles my mind that like schools are not like as transparent as they are supposed to be, but you always have to remember like they're a business. They're not gonna be like, oh yeah, we're scamming you. So yeah.
Right. And it does feel like a scam. So that's that's the tea that we don't talk about. And another great question is, did you grow up on having like what was your relationship with finances growing up, and kind of how is it now? It's a great question.
I can go. I would say that for me, I know specifically in my family, credit cards were like the devil. It was like if you talked about a credit card, like something's wrong with you. Like, why would you ever want to sign your life away with that? So I started carrying that like with me throughout life and everything. And then when I had to get a loan, I'm like, wait, isn't this a part of like the credit? Like, isn't this going to be on my credit lookup? And then my mom's like, well, I think so. So it was always that thing where it's like, we don't really know. So we just tell people to run away from it. So I think now I kind of embrace it. I was like, well, I have to get a credit card if I want to get an apartment, because now they check your credit score. They want the pay stubs. They want everything. And I'm like, how am I going to be able to survive without credit? So I think that I just got a different perspective on it. I think my family was afraid of it and they kind of like instilled fear in me. And now I'm kind of just like, I need it to survive. So I think that's definitely the transition I have going on right now.
For me, I guess it was kind of similar in the sense of like my dad would always make this joke about how he doesn't have credit cards anymore because when he like went to college, like he had so many and he messed up his credit, so he doesn't want to like mess with that anymore. And I mainly grew up with my mom kind of being like the bookkeeper of the house because she knew more about it and she made sure she always like paid her bills on time and stuff like that. So I feel like because of that and like not really having to worry about money growing up, like everything now is very new to me because I never had to think about it. I never had to think about like, oh, like, what if we don't pay our light bill, or oh, what if we don't have this? So like, in a sense, like money does not feel real to me. So I'm kind of teaching myself like, yes, this is real. Credit is real. You need to do this, this, and this. So you could be independent like you want to be. So it's very like strange.
Right, right. And oh, this is a great question. How do y'all maneuver in relationship with men and finances? Because it's a possibility of dealing with abuse financially. And I think that this really ties into like the previous question of like, how did we grow up with dealing with finances? And like, if you're not aware of like how to deal with a lot of these things that are just part of like the real world, like how do we go on and move on from that? Like, how do we go on and like live life as an adult now, having to deal with finances in general, because it's going to deal with you in one way or another. And so what are your thoughts on that?
I think for me, growing up with my mom kind of being in charge of like most of the bills and making sure things are straight, like I I don't want to, I know for myself that I never want to be in a situation where I would have to like rely on somebody else financially. And like the way my parents had things set up, like they would have their own things where they put their money in, and then like something for like what they use for everybody. Like I know like when I'm in a relationship, like this is going to be like this, and if you don't want it like this, like I'm not going to be with you. Because like I always say, like when you're married to somebody or you're really like financially tied to somebody, you're like legally bound to them. So if you're going to be bound to them in that way, like it has to, like everything has to be transparent, and you need to know that like you don't control me, because I'm very much aware of like what can happen to people if they let that happen.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, and I definitely agree. And I think bringing it back to like just having so much student debt, it's like having to find that balance of like, I have these bills, but then I also have this payment that I have to do as well, plus, everything else in between. And so having to figure that out in a relationship setting, or, just as yourself, like that's going to be an entire like lesson that you have to kind of like learn as you go and deal with. And just for the last question, I know that we are running up a little bit on time. Has there been any personal goals or financial goals that you've wanted to do but has been hindered because of your student loans?
I feel like it mostly has to do with like what job I'm gonna end up like applying for and stuff like that. Because it's kind of like, okay, I want to start saving up as much money as I can for anything I need to like get my own place or apply for school or whatnot. But I also have to pay like these regular everyday bills, and now I have to worry about these student loans. So it really affects my goals in terms of like employment. So that really sucks. But like I said before, it's like part of the reality.
Right, right. I definitely agree. So we are running up on time, and I want to thank everyone for being here for amazing panelists. I know Erica got kicked off as again real quick, but I want to say thank you for everyone who's are here. We're here with the conversation, asking these amazing questions. We are always looking for people to hop on and have these conversations with us. And so if you would like to either be a panelist and want to have these conversations with us, or help out and volunteer in any other way, I'm dropping the link in the chat. So definitely feel free to fill that out if you are wanting to get more involved with the organizers and the work that we do and the conversations that we're fostering here in the community. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, Kari, for being here. And I hope everyone has a great and amazing night.
You too. This was amazing. I loved it. I was so nervous, but it was great.
You did amazing. You did amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.